Well, I'm here with Mark Servian, previous campaigner for arts and has stood for council in the past, stood for central government in the past, contributed a lot to the Hamilton community in all sorts of areas. And I thought I'd ask you, since it's an election time and people are making decisions hopefully about who they're going to vote for, what do you think our council needs to be doing to move forward in this change Hamilton's going through, and therefore what do our candidates need to be looking at doing if they want to get elected and actually move Hamilton forward in a positive direction and a progressive direction?
There's many things, and the funny thing is I think actually
we'll
there's a
try
lot
and
of
keep it reasonably short.
Yeah. There's many things, and funny enough, I think a lot of the candidates are making all the right noises. I'm not even sure necessarily that. I think a lot of them want a lot of the same stuff. It's just to what degree. I think 30 years is not that far away. I've lived here 30 years. I can imagine. I arrived here 32 years ago, and so I can certainly imagine 30 years. Everyone who's talking about transport is making the right noises. I think we need to recognise that the opportunities in Hamilton are also the risks, in that unlike most cities in New Zealand, we actually could physically expand exponentially in every direction if we wanted to.
Yeah.
There is no mountain range or harbour in the way.
Yeah.
And so actually that puts an onus upon us not to do that, because we're sitting on some of the most fertile farmland in the world, and we have a responsibility to not cover it in houses. So I certainly don't think. I think the current plans and commitments we've made to fill out within the current boundary in terms of Peacocks and Rotokauri are reasonable.
Yeah.
But I certainly don't think we should be looking to expound the city boundary any further. And we need to be really careful about how we industrialise the corridor that's going to open up between Auckland and Cambridge, whether we've got a boundary there or not. But having said that, once we've done that, what we've got to do is we've got to somehow find a way of making the city denser in a way that doesn't compromise our lifestyles. We can have better lifestyles with a denser city, because a denser city, well designed, will allow us to have effective public transport and that sort of thing. What we've got to recognise is we might actually have to spend a bit of money. We actually have to go into debt, get the future generations to pay for the infrastructure that they're also going to get to use to build some serious infrastructure. And that means light rail through the city. It means really. I mean, we do. Look, don't get me wrong. A lot of the stuff that's happening in terms of public transport and buses and so forth is really worthwhile and is working really well. Excuse me, it's scratch my nose. But that's a regional council.
Yeah.
And the regional council can't be effective in what it's doing in terms of planning buses if the settlement patterns around the major arterial routes aren't right. So now, I'm not saying anything that's news to the people that are running the council, and I don't necessarily think it's news to people who are running. But how the stuff is done is important.
Yeah.
And candidates who simply say, let's cut rates. Look, I absolutely believe we need to get value for our money from our rates. We also have to recognise that there's a degree to which the resources are needed to actually get the city happening. Now, that's not to say that rates fund growth, but it does mean that the city is developing as a city, and there are new things that need to happen, like the theatre. Look, the theatre is the best deal the city's going to get. The city's getting a $76 million theatre for $25 million. That's just the sums. Yeah. Now, if I was a Hamilton rate, I am a Hamilton ratepayer. I would say, declaration of conflict of interest. I'm involved in getting the theatre built through my day job, and I'm also having an interest in terms of the riffraff area around it.
Yeah.
But so therefore, my advice. Therefore, I can't actually have an opinion about it. But if my advice to those who can have an opinion about it is, don't worry about parking. Ask yourself, how do you want a facility that's owned by the public, which is going to be partly funded by the public purse and partly funded by people making donations? How do you want that to work? It can work, it will work, but how do you want it to work? And that's where you should be thinking about stuff, because if we're not, if the fact of this is the irony. The public purse could afford to build something like the theatre.
Yeah.
We could say, and the fact of the matter is, people like me want it built. But if people like me say we want it built, but there's a whole lot of other people in the city who say we don't want to, or we don't want to pay the whole cost of that, we don't want our rates to go up because of that, then we need to find a compromise. The compromise we're heading towards looks like a pretty good one, which is that it's a mixture of the two. And so, therefore, the people who are concerned about rates being too high need to recognise that and acknowledge that this is a city.
Yeah,
we're developing the facility. If the growth pace of growth thing means that the people coming to live here need to pay for the pipes and the roads and the things that they're going to use, we need to continue to pay for the maintenance and the development of the stuff that we use.
Yeah.
And that includes stuff that is the stuff that a city needs. And a theatre is as valid a thing, as much as a needed thing as a sports field, or say any kind of sports facility, or any other kind of arts facility, or museum, or let's say the parks we like to walk around in, or the paths we want to walk down, or all that stuff that makes life here worthwhile. Now, assuming that you're living here because you want life to be worthwhile, you can't oppose making life worthwhile generally. And if you happen to disagree with that particular thing because it's not something that you're going to get benefit from, or you think it's just costing too much, recognise that efforts are being made to find compromises to mean that those of us who want those things can have them, and you can have the things that you want. That's what's going on.
I'm not a sporty type of person.
Really?
Other than taking photographs of sports.
Yeah.
But I can understand that we need sports stadiums.
That's what it is.
Personally, I could see where there is areas like in the arts that could be more done.
Yep.
But again, if I want more in the arts area, then I also have to understand that there's just as many people out there that want more in the sports area.
And so if I could segue from there, so to speak, with the scooter goes going past. Let's think about there's the infrastructure questions, right? There's the what's the council going to do?
Transport.
How do we strike the balance between how much rates are being collected and how much is being spent? Okay, come back to what I was saying earlier in the previous question about representative democracy and how you're having to entrust some representatives to have those technical conversations, blah, blah, blah. Okay, there's that. Let's talk about what sort of city we want to be, which is the context in which the infrastructure is going to be, right? Now, here's my theory about Hamilton. I have a bunch of theories about Hamilton. One of them is this. What makes Hamilton worth living in is that there is the tension between the cosmopolitan and the provincial. In that we're a little big city.
Little big city.
Right? That's what we are. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to want to have the things that cities bring with them. But we want the positive things. We're getting the negative things that come with cities. We know that. That's why
we get those regardless.
We get them. The city's growing. But we want to continue to be a city that's small enough and compact enough and run in a way that it means that you can still know everyone. You still know people, right? It's still easy to get to know people. It's not fragmented into little pieces, and we can lead lifestyles that are given over to going outside the city, out to Raglan or whatever else. It's close to everything else, right? It's maybe it's inevitable. Maybe in 200 years' time, this will be a friggin' metropolis, and it will be a cosmopolitan centre. There's no provincialism left. But at the moment, and for the foreseeable future, we are a cosmopolitan city that's dependent on agriculture. So therefore, we have this interesting tension. Let's maintain that tension. Let's keep that tension and work on both sides of it. And I think that manifests itself. If you think about the last two mayors, Julie Hardacre was very focused on the city we're going to become. I think Andrew King harks back to the town we were. And I think we need a mayor who understands both. And that actually can recognise that we need to maintain that tension, rather than thinking that we have to somehow stay a small town or somehow avoid becoming a big city, or that we're only going to be a big city. Let's see if we can, as long as we can. Because for me, I grew up in Wellington, and I came here because it was a blank slate culturally. You know, you didn't have to climb particular ladders or get past particular gates to participate in things. And that's the great thing about Hamilton. It's actually relatively easy to be involved in a variety of activities, to not be in a niche activity, to have your fingers in lots of pies if you want.
Yeah.
And I think that's a function. I mean, again, disclosure, I'm a McGillicuddy. Back in the days of the McGillicuddy Service Party, and when we were...
I've seen some of the photographs of you back then.
When Garden Place was the hottest street theatre centre in the country, right? We used to say, it's small enough to make an impact, big enough not to get run out of town. Yeah. That is, let's keep that going. So if we can keep that as our ruling philosophy as a town, which is a little big city, and approach how we develop the city as that's the informing idea in the background, then the infrastructure decisions will become relatively straightforward. Okay. We'll know what kind of bridge we want to build. We'll know how big we want things to be. We'll know how big we want. We'll know the scale of stuff, I think.
So, do you think it's a good idea for people to sit down and think about the shape of what sort of Hamilton they want in 30 years' time, and then find the candidates that best take us in that direction?
Well, yes. So that's policy.
Because I know that's not the way a lot of people think about it.
That's policy, personality, ability to work around a table. That's...
what they're going to do for things like transport,
it depends.
Free waters, all these sorts of things, because we have to realise that just taking water for free waters, wastewater and so forth, we are growing, and if we're going to stop our boundaries from spreading and just build infill,
build up,
our infrastructure needs to keep pace with
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very... I think superficially, if you look at the candidates, most of them are promising much the same stuff. There's only so many ways to do the stuff you're talking about. Yeah. It's the underlying philosophy I'm talking about that will inform the way that those things shake down, I think is important. And that, I guess, is a question of vision. I guess it depends. Do you really think that climate change is happening? If you think climate change is happening, then you'll allow for that in your thinking. If you recognise that you want the river to continue to get cleaner, do you want a city that is entirely dependent on the dairy industry, or do we want to develop industries here that are actually dependent on the? I actually think that the fundamental economic advantage New Zealand has is actually its liberal politics, because people, the best and brightest in the world, who don't want to put up with the bullshit that's going on elsewhere, want to live somewhere that actually, this is the theories of Richard Florida, about actually that the wealth generation is wealth is generated by people who've got ideas and are going to, because the thing is that we can't win the race with China on widgets. We can't rate, and the fact of the matter is that our the relative freedom we have here is actually a talent magnet, and Hamilton could be the biggest talent magnet of the whole friggin' lot of them, and that's the thing is that they'll, Gallagher's demonstrate we can still manufacture here if you identify the niche that you're going to work in. They have that thing of
they've been going strong for years,
and part of it is the fact that their factory floor is down the corridor from the place where they do the design. So consequently, they're incredibly nimble. That's their fundamental advantage. That's what, equally, Zuru from Cambridge have built a friggin' enormous toy corporation that does all its manufacturing in China, right? Okay. And massive, is global. The fact of the matter is that both models are going to come from here.
Yeah.
What we need we need a few more Gallaghers, but that's not to say we don't need the Zurus as well.
So that sort of leads into my last question, and that's, do you think Hamilton, if we pay attention to what we're doing, both as the councillors and the voters and the people in general, do you think we can actually be an example to not just the rest of New Zealand, but the rest of the world on how things can be done?
And unfortunately, I think actually Hamilton is a fantastic model for lots of things. one of the things it's not a model for is good behaviour of councillors. I mean, that's the irony, is that the council is the biggest, the councillors, the people around that friggin' table, are the biggest reputational risk to this city right now. Because their behaviour, if you look at the various things that a bunch of them have done over recent years. Now, those are the people that got elected. You guys didn't vote, you got that, right? So if you don't want that, make sure you vote for people who aren't going to behave like that, and let's develop a mature political culture in this town, you know? Yeah. But, clearly people want change because they changed the mayor. Coming back to my favourite bugbear, which is the electoral system. But the point is that which entrenches the current situation. But the thing is that what they, in some ways, I really want people to think about the personalities they're putting up as much as they put about the policy, because I do think the policies are largely the same. I think it's the personalities who get in there and the mix of experiences that we need. That's what's important.
Well, I've noticed through interviewing different candidates, when I've got two people that have got pretty much similar policies. And the personalities when they're putting them across are quite different. And for me, I can look at different candidates that I've interviewed and go, oh yeah, you're saying the same as someone else, but I prefer the way you're going to go about doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually on the big questions like, can we have Maori representation? Because the fact of the matter, they exist. You can't pretend that Māoritanga doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Can we do stuff? Can we actually... Those are where the real value... And, I'm not saying... I'm hoping... I have my hopes and dreams around that stuff, but equally, I don't even think we have an informed debate at the moment because things are so skewed. If we had an informed debate, who knows how the outcome would shake down. There might be other ways of achieving the goals that some people are putting up. But unfortunately now, at the moment, we have such narrow parameters for the debates. And that might require people with real lateral thinking to get in there and put those ideas on the table.
Yeah.
Maybe that might be what's required.
Cool.
Anyway,
thanks very much.
It's all right.
And have a good day.
Yeah, and thank you.
It's quite weird sitting here with you and you're not campaigning.
Yeah, I can't be